Bienvenidos a The Eternal Emigrant, el podcast sobre escritura y viajes. Oh, hello everyone, welcome to The Eternal Emigrant, episode 7. You're hearing well, I'm speaking in English, so there's nothing wrong with your speakers. This is because today is for me a very special day, because we have with us here someone I really wanted to interview since I read her last novel, which is The Movement. I think it's her last novel, if I'm not mistaken. The Movement, it's called in Spanish El Movimiento. She has also published other remarkable books such as All This Belongs to Me or Three Plastic Rooms, among others. And very interesting fact is that also she has lived in Mongolia for a while, which is something that I find it very interesting. Also in the US, and currently I believe she's living in her mother country, Czech Republic, if I'm not mistaken, right? Her 8 novels and 3 plays have been translated into 13 languages. So Petra Hůlová, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Hůlová, with accent in the A. Perfect. Okay. Petra Hůlová, welcome to The Eternal Emigrant, and thank you for accepting to have this chat in my humble podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Ivan.
All right. So I would like to use this time to talk not only about your novels, but as I said before, I find interesting that you were in Mongolia. So I would like to explore together the places you lived in, because I believe they were quite important probably for your works. So I believe your first book, I think if the exact translation is Memory of My Grandmother, which they translated as All This Belongs to Me in the States. I think it takes place in Mongolia, where you spent 1 year, right? 1 year as an exchange student of the degree in culture and anthropology. So tell us a bit, I don't know, what was your experience there, or what sparked your interest in Mongolia and made you go to such a remote place? Because at that time, I think you were studying in Prague. So what made you go there?
Yeah, well, actually, I started studying cultural studies and anthropology after high school. And after 1 year of studying it, I somehow thought it was too broad, and I wanted to focus on a particular culture, but I didn't know which one. And then I accidentally saw this movie by Nikita Mikhalkov. It's called Urga, U-R-G-A. It's a wonderful documentary that sort of little bit of a feature, little bit of a documentary. It takes place in Inner Mongolia, which is an autonomous region, Mongolian region in China. And I just fell in love with the place through that movie, and I thought, wow, I wanted to go there, and I wanted to learn the language and study particularly this culture. This would be my culture that I wanted to focus on. That's what I thought that time. I was 20 years old, and accidentally I figured out that in Prague at Charles University there is a department of Mongolian studies. There are very few of Mongolian studies in Europe. I think just it was something around 5 departments in the whole Europe. So I enrolled, I passed the entrance exams, and I just read a couple of books about Mongolia, did the exams, and started to study. And then the structure of the studying of Mongolian studies is like you study first 2 years in Prague, and for the third year you go to Ulaanbaatar to study there at the National University in Ulaanbaatar. So our whole class of students went there. I mean, whole class, it was like 5 people. It's like tiny department. Yeah. So like 5 of us went there and spent 1 year there. So I was there most of the time studying, living in Ulaanbaatar, but also working a bit and traveling, and also I started to write there. I think out of boredom and loneliness, and that was quite heavy on me at the time. And we had just about like 4 classes a day, so all afternoons and evenings I was free, and I set this goal for myself to write each day 3 books, 3 pages of like my handwriting. That time it was year 2000 or 1999, like old days. So I didn't have a computer that time, so I was writing my hand, and I continued writing these 3 pages a day for a couple of months, and then I returned back to Prague, and I thought I wanted to rewrite this text on my parents' computer, and in the middle of writing it, I realized it wasn't very interesting story. It was just kept my spirit up in Mongolia, but it was not worth rewriting it on computer. But you know what happened with that text, which was not interesting at all, but somehow I felt what it means to spend the time with the text and immerse yourself in writing, and what kind of emotions it creates, and this kind of excitement and rush. And basically I want to go back to that state of mind. So I started from scratch with a different book that was set into Mongolia, and I ended up with my debut, All This Belongs to Me, as you mentioned, which is Mongolia, and that's how it all started, my writing.
So the initial novel, the one that there was before that you discarded, it was a completely different story, but it was also based on Mongolia, or it was just
No, it was set in Prague, and I barely remember. Yeah.
Okay, so and All This Belongs to Me, that tells us I think the lives of 3 generations of women, right, in a Mongolian family. A mother, I think it's 3 sisters, and the daughter of one of the sisters.
Mother,
right?
Yeah. There are just 5 women of different generations. I started up very intuitively. I just adopted this voice of a Mongolian woman or young woman, and started to tell a story through her. And then I just ended up, after, I don't know, 80 pages or something, I just ended up with her story, and I thought, well, somehow the story is finished, but there is more in the bigger story, in the bigger picture. So I started with the voice of her sister, and then added one after another all these voices. So it was not a conceptual work. It was more like very intuitive. As it went, I just added another voices.
That's very interesting, because many times I know some writers who have when they write a novel, they have all the structure already planned, and everything, that how it's going to be the end and so on. I'm kind of completely different as well. I'm kind of more emotional when I write, and I tend to change many things. So I find very interesting that initially, so the story initially is just let's say one voice, and then it became more, because you felt that there was more story to tell. That's very interesting. What is the reality though in the Mongolian, the Mongolian family, typical Mongolian family, or the reality that you saw there?
Well, I went there quite a long time ago last time. I mean, I returned a couple of times after that, my initial stay to Mongolia, but I haven't been there since, I think, 2010 or so. But there is a very different world of the city and then very different world of the countryside that is very difficult to really compare. It's like two continents, I would say, and what I was interested in portraying partly was also this sort of a clash between city life and life in the countryside. What was very interesting in Mongolia, and I think it is sort of a true still, that it's not a rich country. It's a poor country, and people live quite a simple life and most of people don't have much money and so on. But thanks to the fact that they are nomads and they have cattle and horses and sheep, even though they are very poor, there is like no famine, like everybody has enough food to live on. So that's so the I would say the poverty there, as I experienced it, was never as difficult or depressing as poverty you can see, let's say, you were able to see, well, in the city in Ulaanbaatar, where people are like, living on the street and so on, or poverty you see in, let's say, Western affluent countries like maybe my country, United States, where the poverty is just like just sad. When you are poor in the Mongolian countryside, it's just it can be hilarious. It's very spiritual. It's just it can be beautiful life, even though you are very poor. So this difference of the different quality of poverty was very interesting, but also the whole spiritual life, this kind of acceptance of life, that you just like take anything that happens as it comes, as it goes. You just you are more open to just accept life with all its differences. That's something that I hope I kind of learned there, and I admired very much.
That sounds like a very, very interesting experience there. You were comparing, actually, I understand what you mean with this different types of poverty. Let's say you were putting as an example United States, which is actually there's areas, United States, suburbs in United States that are very, very poor, and places that not even anywhere else in the earth you could compare it with that, even though we're talking about a developed country, if you want to call it developed. If we stick to your life timeline, and since you were also talking about the United States, I think you moved there after a few years after your experience in Mongolia, and you stay there I believe 1 year in the Department of Anthropology. So I believe your time in the States also inspired a novel, which is Circus de Mémoire, I believe. So what was your experience in the United States, overall experience, coming from Mongolia going to United States?
Yeah, it was like really kind of clash of extremes. Of course, I went to the United States about like 5 years or 4 years later, and I stayed there for 6 months on an exchange program. It was New York University, and then later I got a Fulbright scholarship, and I stayed there another year in New York. I lived in the Bronx and in the Brooklyn in New York, and well, I I felt extremely lonely and disconnected there again. But I think that these just completely different perspectives kind of extended my horizons of thinking, and something like be able to perceive your own perspective just as one of many others. That's something that I learned from my stays abroad. There are always more viewpoints and more truths, and you can never really understand your position as objective or right, or your not only your position but also your opinion, your understanding. It's all just so partial and so on.
For me, I was also in the States, but I was in a very specific moment of my life, which was when I was a teenager. So I was 16 years old and I graduated in high school there. So coming from a Spanish family in the Northwest, where I would say most of Spain or at least at that time, I think still the same. We were not very, let's say, patriotic nationalism with like we all have our own our own villages, our own nation, kind of, for so many people. And there's people who feel, Basques and Catalans and Galicians who feel like they have their own country on it. So it was a bit difficult, I think, to assimilate, to see so many actually illegal immigrants who were in the high school, which I was illegal also because I went as a tourist and I stayed there 2 years. So, but to see all these people, I don't know, standing up when the national anthem was sounding and like put the hand in their hearts, and also I felt, oh, like this is like very strange, and see all Mexicans and people from Honduras or Ecuador, nobody who was really American, but they were already, I don't know if feeling it or they were kind of somehow forced to fill in it in some way. So for me, everything was a bit fake in this kind of idea of patriotism. So I always had like a lot of problems and confrontations with teachers at that time because they kind of trying to somehow indoctrinate me and tell me like, oh, United States is very important. You have to feel, that you belong here or something like that, to make you feel something that you don't really feel. So I always found this like very strange. However, like after 2 years, that's why I came back after 2 years, even though I had the chance to study there at the university. But it's always interesting for me to see how people perceive the country, depending on where they're coming from and so on, right? Depending on their experiences, the same as when you migrate to one place or another, right?
I know what you mean. I felt the same in the US. Like this kind of patriotism was for me like sometimes difficult to bear. On the other hand, this sort of a self-confidence was nice at times. Other times it seemed to be sort of a narrow-minded as well. But what I really appreciated a lot was, even though sometimes it was just very sort of a shallow and superficial, but this sort of a people there, I felt like wished me success in a way when I was like, achieving something in the US at the university or whenever. Like I I felt like people were very supportive. In my country, I would say people are more of a jealous when you are
Oh,
successful. So
that's the
through
same
more
in Spain. Exactly the same. Yes, I
country, like,
understand that.
hide your achievements so you don't raise this kind of jealousness. But there is one other different moment, interesting, that I felt when I was in the US, and before, and this comparison of being in the US and in Mongolia kind of enabled me to feel it, was that I am from Central Europe. That's like politically quite a specific place in between, let's say, Western Europe and Russia. And we are small states, and we were always somehow in between, never really part of, the Eastern world, but never really being part of the Western world. And it's very interesting position, also mental wise and like thought wise. And when I was in the Mongolia, I was there as a representative of like this kind of developed rich Europe, let's say, and people took me that way as this, woman from this like beautiful rich world. Whereas in the US, I was this, Easterner from Eastern Europe, whose country even they thought I was from Chechnya, not Czech Republic, but from Czechia. And so it was completely different position on the hierarchy of, what you represent. So that was also interesting. And that's something I would say is specific for our region too, that let's say for Ukrainians, we do represent the West, and they come to our country to work here and not only escape from the war, but also earn money and so on. And people from the Czech Republic tended until recently look with sort of a disrespect onto Ukrainians as Easterners, as like half Russians who are like eating with their hands, basically. Whereas, we kind of admired whatever Western countries, Germany and so on. And people from Germany and France look at Czechs with this kind of disrespect, this kind of funny line from the east to the west, where we are in between positioned. So I think that my experience in Mongolia and in the United States in a different way also translated my Central European experience.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. It's a very, very interesting point that you are, depending on where you're coming from, they perceive you in a completely different way. Let's dig a little bit on your last work now, on the movement. Let's move to that. Because some people have seen some similarities with the popular Handmaid's Tale that became popular after the Netflix, I believe. Well, I think it's definitely quite different, starting from the fact that in your dystopian novel, women are kind of ruling, let's say, ruling the society, or at least ruling certain countries in which they have built these re-education centers for men that are still looking at the world in the old world way, as you describe, no? So basically, this movement is trying to change things. I believe like the objectification of the women, and emphasizes that women should be valued for their inner abilities, such as the personality and so on, instead of the physical appearance, right? So then the narrator is a guard of one of these re-education centers, and the story is told as a memoir that she's constantly writing, normally while she smokes, no, and she goes to her office to write on her free time. There are a lot of reads that we can do of your novel, but what was your main aim when you wrote it? What did you want to show exactly? The dangers of promoting equality through this some sort of authoritarianism, What was your main objective, let's say, if there was an objective?
Yeah. Well, I hope that you are never able to wrap up a good novel into 1, 2, or 3 sentences. If you are able to do it, then it's like maybe it can be a script for a good movie, but hardly a novel. But still, I'll try. Well, and I'll repeat the same in a different words. What was important for me was this quality of ambiguity that the book has, I believe. It was, I think, written in one of the reviews in the United States that it's a feminist manifesto and critique at the same time. Well, because I think all this idea to really de-objectivize males, gaze, and kind of grounds an attractivity of female on completely different basis than sexual attractivity related to youth and, you know, appearance. This traditional beauty is a very kind of a appealing thing to do, because it sort of humanizes in a way relationships, makes it more spiritual, less based on something that is very let's say unfairly distributed, but also superficial and so on. So and from my very childhood, I felt that I was judged on the basis of my appearance a lot more than my male peers and so on.
Yeah.
So the ground of the thought is sort of a mine, genuine and very feministic. But at the same time, once you start to put this nice idea into practice, there are obstacles, and then it's very difficult to overcome these obstacles, because I believe there is also something like our biological qualities involved that are nowadays very uncool to mention, even that there are any biological qualities in us and so on. So so it's, I would say it's a dialogue with myself on that topic, and what I wanted to create was emotionally and intellectually disturbing environment that you as a reader have to cope with. On the one hand, there is a nice idea of sort of a desexualizing of males' gaze. It's kind of nice. On the other hand, there are like well, tools of the movement applied in order to do it, and these tools are kind of scary too. So well, what to do with it? I think it can be wrapped up as another variation onto this old saying that way to hell, how it sounds, it is yeah, way to hell can be a path of good thoughts. It's not an accurate translation, but you know that you can end up in hell with your beautiful idea once you get very stick to it and radical about it. So in that way, something universal and something we can see also in other situations and examples. And you know, in the beginning was really my interest to explore this subject, and through my novels I do explore things, emotions and thoughts, and I believe that this process of exploration is something I am taking my reader with me, and the result is always unforeseeable in the beginning, and in the end kind of difficult to summarize. What it is all about is this sort of disturbing quality, and you being pushed to have a dialogue with yourself.
Yeah, I got you. I have a specific question about the novel, which is the place where the novel is located. If I get it correctly, Czech Republic is kind of I don't know if it's the leading country of the movement, because actually Rita, which is somehow the main leader, right? Where kind of the one who started everything, she's Czech. So she's followed also as a leader. I know, of course, you are Czech, but I'm just wondering why the movement originates there, or it has so much presence in Czech Republic, in not in any other country, for instance.
Yeah, well, I said it in the Czech Republic, but I would say that the environment is more of a European Union sort of environment, that like the location for me was rather like Europe as such than Czech Republic specifically. It's not really, I wouldn't say there is anything very Czech. I think it sort of rather represents kind of a European or it is a dialogue with European thinking on, let's say, feminism.
Okay, I thought maybe there was like a hidden information there that make you chose Czech Republic, because you mentioned other areas also, but I was just wondering whether the fact that Rita is from Czech Republic and so on, it has like a special meaning or something. But if it's more like in a European level. Yeah.
One of the inspirations was like something that happened to me in Prague, but it could have happened somewhere else as well. I think I was walking the street with my daughter. She was like 6 years old that time, and there was this huge billboard on the streets of Prague, and there was this lady in tiny bikini, and it was an advertisement on a product. I don't know, it was a soap or shampoo or whatever you imagine, and there was this beautiful almost naked lady, and my daughter asked me, Mommy, why was the lady naked? Why? And it really struck me very strongly. Like, can you answer? What answer can you give to a innocent little girl that she can digest or that you want to give her? You know. So that was one of the impulses for the novel, but it could have easily happened elsewhere too. So it's more like this sort of a European setting as such.
Because I feel also that I believe in Czech Republic, pornography was prohibited until, I don't know, maybe 1980 something or 1990 or something like that, probably. So maybe this impact kind of in after that after raising the prohibition and becoming also one of the I don't know, like one of the attractives, let's say, of Prague is promoted somehow in many ways as a sexual tourism. So this kind of big difference in such a small period of time, I thought maybe it's something that it can be like for the people, like a bomb to explode, to be able to switch their mind in such a short period of time. So, but
well, yeah, I wouldn't say it was present in my thoughts, but you touched something really interesting: the fact that in the times of communism, let's say until 1989, until the fall of communism, really pornography was something, well, of course, forbidden, something difficult to get, but also something that was understood as something that is like anti-regime sort of activity, so that like people who were close to a dissident movement, let's say, gathered in someone's flat and they were like watching pornography, and it was something like reading forbidden literature, something that's activity that you show your anti-regime attitude through.
Yeah.
So that's funny, because then it became like the most not only the most stupid thing and the most like proliferated thingy, but also something that became as a kind of a representative element of a new regime, So
yeah.
Something that was very, very anti became like the most conformist thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about a few things in the novel that I found very interesting that I would like to highlight. First is I think there's a conversation with there's a conversation with one of the clients of this re-education center, Richard. I think it was Richard. I found it interesting because I felt that until that moment I had several questions, or I was kind of in my head was saying there's so many things that I would like to ask, or I would say at this point, and that hasn't been solved yet. And Richard was somehow the character that made me answer those questions, or say things that I wanted to be heard somehow in the novel. So I really enjoyed that part when he enters into the conversation that they had. Another shocking, or the second moment, which is like shocking, it's of course in the moment that there's a client, I think, that hangs himself, and of course the posterior reaction of the guard, who was, I believe, kind of in love with him, and they had this kind of affair. That was also quite shocking how you describe the moment. And the third moment is also when you describe the phase 6, which I don't know why, but at that time I thought phase 5 was the final exam. Somehow I probably didn't read properly, but then when I read phase 6, I was like, okay, which is basically performing a sexual intercourse with a mature woman. And there was a particular quote. I'm going to quote. It says something: "In addition to lubricant and a glass of water, there is also a bucket in every stall in case of nausea." That was like very, I think, brutal and visual, So I don't know. We're constantly seeing the consequences of this dictatorial and brainwashing kind of techniques of the movement. However, they're always able to explain it, and at least the main character Vera is always able to explain it and offer a reason for it. Nowadays, also in our society, we have some groups labeled as feminist, that are somehow generating conflict with men and using men as the enemy. I'm not saying this is the majority. There's, of course, huge healthy feminism, in which I believe also, but there are always political parties and other interests that prefer, I think, confrontation instead of working together. Do you think this situations, I don't know, like the ones described in the book, could ever happen in the future? And what is your opinion on the current role of these groups that are called themselves feminists, but they are like looking more about, I think, probably confrontation?
I think you probably wouldn't be surprised me to say that the book was criticized by some feminists very strongly, that it's just is like sort of a unbased critique of feminism, and like kind of satire about something that does not exist. And one thing that I definitely have a problem with is often this tendency to really explain everything as cultural based and a form of a construct. But I believe we are also just beings as other beings around us, and we do our we are determined by also our bodies, and there are things that are simply difficult to change, or there is always something you also have to pay for, something you get. I just always tend to think about the other sides, and also well, sometimes I also think, if I was a man nowadays, I'd feel offended and hurt so many times, and I'd be often also frustrated, and I think some of the environment just trigger just passive aggression in many males, and I feel with it, because females are being just very often put into that position of a victim, and it's interesting that on the one hand, we as females are kind of fighting for power, for our emancipation, but on the other hand, showing again and again our own weakness. And sometimes it seems to me like counterintuitive too. And it's like there are so many things. I just anytime there is a kind of a trend that is trying to keep you muted, and I feel it when I'm when I talk about my experience as a woman, I feel just sometimes feminists don't want to listen to it because it does not like fit their purpose necessarily. When I say I've never had a problem like being an artist and like raise 3 kids and like these things, that I was not like suffering as mother and all that, many people just call it like privileged experience that shouldn't be even like openly spoken out because it does not represent most of the women,
Yeah,
so
it's gonna hurt the
with
idea. Yeah.
I always identified myself as feminist. That's what I've always done. But
I totally understand what you just said. I feel very similar, and I think most of the critics that I could read also in some platforms, I felt they were very simplistic critics without really thinking. It's more about that nowadays it's very hard to talk about many topics. This is one of the topics, but there are other topics that we cannot talk about, and everything's getting harder and harder with time when social media and everything. It's getting harder because uh, people are scrutinizing every single word you say or every single word you use or you write in social media, and you are kind of invalidate for the rest of the times. If you commit one error or you say something that you shouldn't supposed to say, and you are kind of a public figure, that's it. It's the end of the story. So this is also part of the problem as well. So people, when I have the feeling that when they read the novel, if they see something that doesn't really fit in their thinkings, because they could probably see that, oh, okay, so for this novel is talking about for once that women are ruling the society and things are going bad. So that's a very narrow-minded perception of what the novel is talking about, right? But I believe for what I read, this kind of the critics are coming from that side, which is a shame. But unfortunately, also that's everyone is free to, of course, criticize whatever and to express their opinions. No, I'm just also doing the same about the critics. But let's change the topic, because we are reaching the end of the interview. I just wanted to, since I have you here, I would like to know your opinion about, well, that's maybe not a good topic to end the interview because I can talk for many minutes, but the current situation of the industry, literary industry, and specifically in the Czech Republic. I don't know if it's the same as in any other place. Basically, we don't have too much information, of course, about Czech Republic. In my case, I don't have too much information about how is the situation there. So how hard is to survive as a writer, let's say, these days in Czech Republic with so much books being published and so many options in the market?
Well, of course, it's difficult. It's very difficult, and I thought that after 20 years of really dedicating myself to the profession of being a writer, I'd be like somewhere else than still kind of like fighting for survival. So that's sort of a sad that it's so hard. But on the other hand, it's part of the deal. It's part of the deal of being an artist. And I think that actually now, when there is like this, let's say, systematic critical reflection of literature, which used to be in newspapers and magazines and medias, kind of is less and less there, and it's more and more about social media and advertisement and all that. So this kind of overall reflection of the scene is really hard to get, and also the voice of, let's say, very good critics is relatively weak to the voice of important influencers and YouTubers and so on. So what I wanted to say, yeah, that yeah, and you, but on the other hand, to publish a book is very easy thing. Anyone can basically publish a book. So there are so many books being published, so then it's even more difficult to distinguish good and bad books and so on. But this, I would say, this hardness of really leading a life of a writer, to really somehow go through it for years, I think it's one of the few criterions of quality that we have now, you know, that one is really persevering, like really keeping going on for years and years, doing the thing. And that's what it is all about. I mean, again, there are these voices, like, you know, what starts to be a norm in my field is like writers asking basically for subsidies, like for state subsidies. And I think it's horrible. I wouldn't ever want to live on like subsidies. It's just so sad. And you know, if you cannot earn enough with your writing, just and earn money with your job and write, you know, on the weekends. I know it's difficult, but really, let's not let the state to make us like these, you know, feeded chickens who are then giving these eggs of texts that are written in a certain way about the certain topics that are being called for through grants, like environment, gender, and I don't know what, you know. It's like once you start to really apply for certain money, then you get into the circle of writing about things that are being fucking supported. And that's a vicious circle artists should never be part of. So, and that's also something when I say, like, my colleagues from the fields are often pissed off because they take it as something that shouldn't be said aloud. But I think that being an artist, being writer is like dangerous, fucking difficult profession. And probably it's just part of the way it is. You know, after 20 years of like whining and crying, being part of the field that constantly whines and cries and begs for money, I'm so tired of it.
I understand that. I appreciate that you say it actually out loud, because I think it's a very good point, the one you just raised. We are really out of time, I think, because normally we take 1 hour, try to be 1 hour. I mean, every time we are going, I'm going a little bit farther and farther every episode. So I just want to ask you one last question before we finish. very quick question, just because since we are, well, our main audience, I think, is in Spain. So could you tell them maybe some writers, the new generation of Czech writers that you would maybe that are maybe not so popular outside of the Czech Republic, but maybe that had been translated to English, otherwise it would be hard for us to read. But can you recommend us some?
Czech writers
Yes.
that are translated into English.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That. Yeah.
So the condition is that they should be translated into English.
I would say so, because otherwise for the people to read the book is quite hard.
Yeah. Well, out of the contemporary writers, I would definitely recommend Joachim Topol, Michal Aivas, and Bianca Belová.
Okay.
Let's stick to 3.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we write these names. I will look for them also. I will check them out. And maybe I will, or our audience will also have the pleasure to read from them. Hopefully it's the same pleasure as reading also your books. So we have reached the end of the interview now. So I would like to, of course, thank you once again for allowing me to have this this chat, to ask you some questions about your work, about your life in different countries, the different cultures. I hope you were comfortable during the interview. I wish you all the best also for your incoming projects. And from here, we of course recommend the audience to read the movement, because I think it really opens your mind on the dangers of certain mentalities that I believe that are already in our society. So thank you very much, Petra.
Thank you, Ivan, for inviting me, and I wish you all well with your Eternal Emigrant.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day. Ciao.